The sabotage mission hung under the oppressive weight of what they'd become. The veteran, once a symbol of unwavering loyalty, now moved like a ghost through the facility he'd helped legitimize. Each corner held the echoes of his past complicity, of the enthusiastic speeches and the naive hope that had withered into the grim determination fueling his current actions. The scientist, usually so precise in her calculations and calibrations, now fumbled with vials of the destabilizing compound, the corrosive substance burning like guilt in her hands. Her brilliance had been twisted, her discoveries a grim foundation for the monstrous miracles that the Lazarus Resurrection Project wrought. Sleep was now a luxury her conscience refused to afford. Anna, the orchestrator, saw her reflection in a monitor displaying the sterile lab where the next batch of unwilling heroes was prepped for their first death. It mirrored her own soul, twisted and compromised by the desperate choices made in the name of a greater good that now felt like a hollow, horrific lie. Then came the moment. The veteran, exploiting a calculated lapse in security he'd once proudly helped design, slipped into the storage chambers. Row upon row of shimmering pods held the stabilizer solution, the lifeblood of the project and its consequences. It was disgustingly simple. A few vials released, the subtle contamination spreading like a slow-acting poison. As he retreated, a flicker of doubt snaked its way into his resolve. Had it been too easy? Were they being intentionally exposed? The sabotage a twisted test, a way to weed out dissent? Paranoia, that relentless companion in times of clandestine warfare, gnawed at his sanity. Meanwhile, the cloaked figure navigated a different battlefield. Sleazy bars and dimly lit data ports replaced sterile corridors and gleaming consoles. Their contacts were a motley crew, a disgraced alien geneticist with a grudge against the Federation, a cynical information broker who smelled profit in the desperation, and a network of disillusioned couriers who'd grown wary of the Galactic Federation's increasingly secretive cargo. The path was convoluted, intentionally so, each step designed to erase their trace. Yet, just when a final handoff seemed imminent, the fragile chain snapped. The broker, greedy and fearful, alerted the authorities. The cloaked figure escaped, but the data was seized. The leak had failed, or worse, it was now bait in a deadly Federation trap. News of the botched mission rippled back to their clandestine group. Panic flared, threatening to shatter their fragile alliance. But amidst this setback, a chilling realization dawned. This was confirmation. It validated their worst fears, exposing the depths of ruthlessness the Federation would stoop to in order to protect its immoral project. It was time for a desperate gamble. A final act that would force the galaxy to witness the horrors they had unleashed. Anna stared at the smuggled comm device, a relic of pre-Federation tech that was nearly impossible to trace. The message was curt, the cloaked figure's usually distorted voice laced with urgency. Compromised. Data seized. They know. Beneath the coldly efficient words, she sensed a chilling desperation. The veteran's weathered face hardened. "Rescue mission," he spoke, his voice raw with a mix of guilt and grim determination. He owed the cloaked figure that much. Their sacrifice had bought them precious time. The scientist, however, was unusually quiet. The failures, the close calls, they'd mirrored the increasingly chaotic trajectory of her research. This wasn't sabotage anymore. It was all-out survival, and a purely scientific mind wasn't built for the brutal calculus of such a conflict. But as they began to formulate a plan, Anna stopped them. "The data, they have it," she began, her politician's poise momentarily failing. "They'll use it, twist it. We need to strike at the heart of the lie." The veteran and the scientist exchanged troubled glances. They'd followed her this far, driven by their own guilt and a desperate hope for redemption. But this was something else entirely. "We go public," Anna declared, her eyes blazing with a chilling resolve. "Not a leak, a declaration. We force the Federation's hand, turn their whispers against them." The scientist fumbled for words. "Senator, they will silence you. A staged accident, a smear campaign. They'll turn you into a cautionary tale." The veteran nodded grimly. "She's right. They tried it with me once, remember? The unfortunate training incident." His scarred hands clenched into fists. "They'll make examples of us." Anna met their gazes unflinchingly. "Then let us be examples that cannot be ignored. We release not just the data, but our own testimonies, our admissions of complicity. Let them deny it. Let them paint us as traitors. The truth will seep out. Let our sacrifice expose the rot at the Federation's core. They were soldiers, scientists, politicians. But now they were something more. They were rebels with nothing left to lose, fueled by the desperate conviction that their deaths might ignite a spark of resistance far greater than anything their lives could achieve. The plan was hatched with a chilling lack of alternatives. They would turn themselves into martyrs for a cause that until recently they had blindly served. The veteran would exploit his residual connections, triggering a security alert and forcing a very public arrest. The scientist, having secretly compiled a comprehensive record of her work, would transmit the evidence and her own testimony to those beyond the Federation's reach. Anna would use her political platform one final time, delivering a fiery speech that would be cut short by the authorities, its brutal silencing only fanning the flames of her accusations. As they parted ways, it wasn't with the grim camaraderie of past battles, but with the chilling finality of those willingly walking into the abyss. The monsters they had fought to create paled in comparison to those they would now face. Not aliens across the star lanes, but the faceless machine of a Federation that had devoured its own soul. Yet, in that sacrifice lay their desperate final hope for a kind of redemption. The veteran's arrest was a spectacle, not the quiet disappearance of a dissident, but a calculated display of the Federation's iron fist. Shock troopers, once under his command, stormed the modest apartment he'd retreated to after his disillusionment. No fabricated charges, no pretense of due process. Their orders were brutally clear. He offered no resistance. The fight bled out of him long ago. News feeds, long accustomed to broadcasting tales of the Phoenix Squad's victories, buzzed with this unexpected turn. The veteran, a figure from a fading era of traditional heroism, now labelled a traitor. The whispers began, hesitant at first. Perhaps this was the inevitable decay of any war machine, cracks appearing even in the most polished of facades. Meanwhile, the scientist became a hunted ghost. Her unremarkable home transformed into a makeshift bunker, bristling with jury-rigged counter-surveillance and paranoia. Each creak of the floorboards, each flicker of static on ancient comm devices felt like the heavy footsteps of faceless enforcers closing in. The data dripped out like poison, raw research files, confessions of ethical lines crossed and blurred beyond recognition, her own analysis of the stabilizer's increasingly unnerving side effects. It was a desperate missile launched from a crumbling fortress. She knew they would come for her. perhaps before her frantic transmissions could even reach their scattered, uncertain targets. Anna's moment came during a hastily convened emergency session following the veteran's arrest. Cameras focused on her, not in anticipation of some brilliant strategy, but with the morbid curiosity reserved for public executions. She began not with fiery rhetoric, but with the quiet, chilling confession of a soul laid bare. Her complicity in those early hopeful days of the Lazarus Resurrection Project, her slow descent into moral compromise, and the day the horrifying reality of what she'd helped create shattered her naive illusions. The chamber erupted in shouts, loyalists attempting to drown out her accusations, a desperate attempt to maintain order within a narrative spiraling out of control. Then came the inevitable, security personnel surging forward to silence her. The transmission cut off mid-sentence, replaced by the grainy footage of chaos from a hastily discarded personal comm. It was enough. The seed of doubt, painstakingly planted, had sprouted, fueled by the image of a senator wrestled into silence. The end came swiftly, as they knew it would. The veteran, in a heavily guarded cell, watched the newsfeed flicker with Anna's last defiant words, a twisted echo of the propaganda posters he'd once adorned. His own public trial would be a farce, but it no longer mattered. The scientist, cornered in her makeshift bunker, didn't hear the strike force break down her door. The last transmission went out, its desperate contents irrelevant. Her arrest would be a footnote, her name vilified, just another cautionary tale. Yet the war they waged had achieved its grim objective. The lie of the Federation's invincibility, the terrifying myth of heroic sacrifice, was cracked. Their frantic actions, their fates willingly offered, were not victories, but accusations echoing through the cracks. Perhaps in the seed of doubt they planted, a true resistance might blossom, stronger and wiser for the heavy cost of their desperate resistance. And maybe their sacrifice would be the catalyst, the horrifying example that finally pushed others within the Galactic Federation toward a similar desperate gamble in order to reclaim a humanity that teetered on the brink of extinction, even as their undead creations walked the stars.